Have we officially entered the first turning? Now, if you don't know what the turnings are, there's four of them. One, two, three, four. I believe that we were in the fourth turning, and perhaps, I don't know 100%, but perhaps we've entered the first turning. Now, what are the turnings? Well, the turnings are about what's called the saeculum. This is an ancient idea of about 80 to 100 years. Every 80 to 100 years, a new cycle appears, and it basically is like a song or a season. It rhymes with the last 80 years. So why 80 years? Why 80 to 100? About 80 to 100 years. Why about that time? And this has been going back millennia, thousands of years, but we can just talk about what's happened in this country's existence. Well, why 80 years is number one, every 20 to 22 years, something around that, what happens? People tend to have kids. Now, it's happening later now, but on average, if you think about it, kids getting pregnant at 16, 17, 18, 20, you're most fertile in that 20-year range, and that's when people have a lot of kids. So then what happens? You have a kid at 20, and then what happens? They have a kid at 20. So now we're at 40. They have a kid at 20, 60. They have a kid 80. So now, from the first generation to then we bounce through four generations, what happens between the first and the fourth? How many of you have a good relationship with your great grandparents? Not many people, because what happens is people die. So when you have that gap from the first to the fourth, what ends up happening? The same problems erupt that happened at the first that happened at the fourth, meaning the people that were alive at the first aren't alive at the fourth to be able to communicate about what happened at that time. So the problems tend to stick around, or they tend to, again, rhyme. They're not the same, but they tend to be very, very similar in the way that they go. And there's all different sorts of turnings. There's the first turning is the high, the second turning, I forget what it is. It goes through these other things where there's problems, we solve them, we have good times, we have an awakening, and then I think that's what it is, the awakening, the high, the awakening, the unraveling, and then the crisis, all right? And that's the fourth turning. Well, I thought for a while that we were gonna have something bad happen in us, and we were just beginning the fourth turning a little while ago, and it might be true. I don't know 100%, again, I'm asking this question, but I'm thinking now that maybe the COVID pandemic was the big crisis of our fourth turning. And maybe it started around the 2009, 2008 economic crisis, and we've just been going kind of batshit crazy ever since. And then we had this culmination through the COVID pandemic. So 15, 20 years, maybe it started earlier with 2001 and the 9/11. Maybe about those 20 to 25 years, we've been kind of in this weird malaise where things have just been unraveling and going down, and we have this crisis but I don't know if there's a reconciliation. So I wanted to ask, are we in the first turning now, or are we maybe turning the corner into a more positive light? And I think one of the turning point moments is the Trump and Joe Rogan interview. When Joe Rogan interviewed Trump, I think that was a big thing. I think that swayed the election. And I think what happened was there was a lot of pressure from the news media. I talked about news media yesterday with my post. And the news media talks about Trump being this Nazi, this dictator, this person. And the people were kind of like, hey, I agree with you because he's nuts, he's crazy, he's off the rails. But then this interview comes out, and there's 3 hours of Joe and Trump talking to each other. And it's like, if you're kind of undecided, or if you're just curious about Trump, you have 3 hours straight, unedited information on this guy. So if he's what they say they are, you're probably going to pick it up in those 3 hours. And I think a lot of people watched that, and I think a lot of people were looking for bad, and they didn't find anything. They just found a human being, and they actually found maybe someone that they liked. And then they had JD Vance on. And then he had another 3 hours of the same sort of thing. And it's like, well, if this administration are Nazis and dictators, and they're going to take away all your rights, and you're going to be put in jail for speaking against them, number one, why didn't that happen 4 years ago when Trump was in office? But maybe these people aren't what they say they are, and maybe they're actually going to help us do what I really want. Whether on the left or on the right, I talk about this. Do you want to be in proxy wars where all it benefits is a military industrial complex and it destroys human life here from our military? They die. Other life in other countries, innocent civilians and other military dies for people who are already wealthy getting even more wealthy? Do you really want that? I don't think anybody on right or left as a person, maybe in the big conglomerates and the corporations and all this craziness that goes on, but really, do you want that? No, left or right, I think we can agree. Do you want healthcare companies profiting, pharmaceutical companies profiting off of our illness while we get sicker, where we don't have any marketed improvement in our health? It's not healthcare, it's sick management. Costs of insurance keep going up, costs of medications go up, costs of hospital visits go up. While they make a ton of money, they turn into for-profit hospitals and they turn into all these things, and they're making all this money while we get actually sicker. We don't get healthier, we actually get sicker. So healthcare is not sick, it's not health management, healthcare, it's sick management. That's why I call it sick management. I think we can all agree we want that to go. RFK talks about make America healthy again, this movement of let's get health back into healthcare. What a concept. I think we all agree on that. Tulsi Gabbard was taking care of talking about the proxy wars in other countries. RFK talks about this. Donald Trump talks about putting our country first, right? Hey, we can't help other countries if we have our own problems within our own nation. That's just simple. So this whole idea of, hey, we want to help other countries, I'm right there with you. If they don't have enough, we want to be able to help. But if we don't have enough, we can't help. It's just like what they say in an airplane. If turbulence happens and the oxygen masks drop down, you have to put yours on first before you even put your child's on. Why? Because if you pass out, then you're no good to your kid. You have to put yourself first. It's basic, but it's so important. And so that's what I think came through with Trump's interview is he's like, look, I'm actually looking out for this nation. Now, again, he could screw it all up. We could be way worse. Again, this could just be a little blip in the fourth turning where we have a feeling of good and then it disappears. So I don't know. I'm asking the question, but I think when we look back, those moments might be turning points. You saw it now with the election. There was a complete reversal in the popular vote. The popular vote went to the Democrats, which is unheard of. And now we have this nation that is kind of looking towards reconciliation. You saw it with Trump and Biden in my last post. They're shaking hands, they're smiling. Biden's got this big grin on his face. It's like, what is going on? The comment section, when you're looking at it, is positive towards Biden. I go, I would have never thought that. I would have never thought that 6 months ago. You know, we were bashing this guy, dementia, all this other stuff. But I think now people are starting to move on. Even the news media might be starting to move on because it's like, hey, we got to come together. And what a moment for us when you have a person like Joe, he's not, people talk about him being conservative. He's been attacked by the left. He wanted to have Kamala Harris on. He wants open things. He's very open to things. He's much more liberal than people like to make him out to be. And he's this liberal guy. He wasn't a Trumper. He had Trump on and he got to see Trump as well. He got to get to know his character. And that moment, I think for us is we're going to look back and go, that swayed a lot of voters. That changed a lot of people's opinion. Whether that helps us or not, again, it's still yet to be seen. But I have a feeling with the pressure from society on this administration, because now we have all this access to them, we can communicate on so many different levels with social media. I feel like we're rounding a corner. And maybe it's just we're at that corner where, like World War II, we're now galvanized together to do something for good, and it still has tough times ahead of us, and we still have another 5-10 years of craziness and turmoil. But I feel like maybe we're starting to galvanize ourselves together so that we can take on some of those other threats. So whether we're in the first turning or if we're just getting out of the fourth, maybe there's still a crisis that happens, but we're going to be better suited to be together. And you saw that through the election. You're seeing that through things on social media. I think if we then start taking it to the next step, which is, hey, I disagree with you, but where can we find the commonalities? Yeah, I might disagree with you on this, but I'm willing to listen. And I heard that the other day. They said there's two people, there was pro-life and pro-abortion, and they were actually talking together, and they said, I've never even had a conversation. I've never even had a conversation with someone that wasn't pro-life or wasn't pro-abortion. And so it's like, now if we're able to start having those conversations, now we can come to terms with things. And I think that's the only way. that we're going to be able to reconcile and actually come up with laws and come up with things that help the nation. It's not just going to be, like we talked about, a dictatorship where one side rules, because then in 4 years it's going to go back the other way. I don't think that that's a positive way. I think this is an opportunity for our nation to come together and actually make the future, and whether or not, when we talk about the fourth turning, whether or not it's just 20 years down the future and then things start going to crap again. But if we then get through this phase and we come together, we're going to be able to put a lot of things in place that will help the next generation. And then we can move on. And then we can create our own problems in the future, and we have new problems. But I think these old problems that we've been discussing, like we said, with healthcare and wars and all that, maybe those things go away and then we end up with other problems. Just like people talk about when you get wealthy, more money, more problems. You have other issues that come up, but they're of a better quality. Instead of you not knowing where to eat, all right, you've got someone trying to steal your identity because you have so much money. You know what I mean? So it's like, hey, you actually are someone who, hey, you wouldn't want to steal my identity 20 years ago. You know what I mean? Those types of things. You've leveled up in your problems, but they never go away. So maybe that's us as a nation. Maybe we're now leveling up to a different phase. I don't know. I feel like it might be teetering between that. Still yet to be seen. This world is so unpredictable, and nothing surprises anymore because everything is surprising. It's just that level of ridiculous. So I don't know, but I'm asking the questions. That's what I do on this channel, and I love your feedback. Where do you think we're at? If you've read The Fourth Turning, great book. I'll put a little link to it to get that book so that you can check it out to learn more about our history. If you want to just see it in action, just go back 80 years. World War II, go back 80 years. Civil War, go back 80 years. Independence, go back 80 years. There was another big war. You go back and you look, these big crisis points. Was COVID our big crisis? I'm starting to think that that's what it was, because for me, it was a war on my psychology. I almost went absolutely bonkers. Actually, I kind of did. I ended up with, my drug addiction and my alcohol addiction went really bad after that fact, right? And I think a lot of that had to do with where my state of mind was, where I then ended up going downhill, looking at the world in a negative place. And I think that's was part of what it was. It was a war on humanity, and we're starting to bring that back. I really feel much more optimistic about this future. That's not just because I'm not doing drugs and I'm not drinking anymore. That's part of it. That's a huge part of it. So I can see and I can feel straight. But when I look and see in the world, I feel like there's a change. So I don't know. I ask a lot of questions. I ponder a lot. That's what we do on this channel. I love your opinions because I'm just sharing mine. And that's all I got for you guys today.